Welcome to the ABCs of Horses, a Big Blend radio podcast featuring Christy Wood, a world champion horse trainer, a carded horse show judge, an equestrian expert, and an author. Welcome, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about kicking, not necessarily kicking and screaming. We don't want you to be screaming and we don't want you to be hurt, but we're going to be talking about like the world of kicking and communication, and we're going to be talking about that from the human side and also the horse side. And as always, Christy Wood is here. So welcome back, Christy. How are you?
Fine, Lisa. Thanks for having me again.
Hey, I love this podcast. We get into all kinds of conversations, all horse related, but it is just every time I think of a horse, I'm like, I get so excited because they're just these amazing beings. And I love the topic today, Kay. I never thought we'd be talking about kicking, but apparently this is a necessary conversation that has to be had, because kicking is involved in communication, but it doesn't mean you're necessarily hurting your horse. And at the same time, we want to talk about humans and kicking so that you don't get kicked, like if a horse kicks you. So, yeah, this is an interesting balance. Who's getting kicked when and where? Right. So, can we talk about the human connection with the horse with kicking first? Because, I want people to understand you do not want to be hurting your horse, right? I want to just start off at that point. This is not about, like digging holes into your horse with your spurs, right?
Oh, goodness, no.
I'm just being, with no bullying, right?
Oh, heavens, no. Heavens, no. No, not at all.
Yeah, well, the word kick, it can be, it's one of those words that it could be misused.
Well, certainly you could kick up dust and you could kick at a rock or whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
But when we use kicking for horses, we do want people to understand it's in a positive way, not a negative way. And kicking does sound like a negative word if it's used in the wrong way. So let's talk about, we can start with the ground in leading your horse. And for sometimes a horse may try to outwalk you or not quite respond to maybe pressure on the halter to back up. So you can assist with additional, we'll call it pressure, not kicking, to ask a horse to back up, possibly just lightly tapping on its hoof with your toe to apply a little more pressure to get the horse's attention at the same time that you're applying some pressure from the halter, and a verbal command of asking that horse to back to get the horse to move its hoof. So it's, we're not talking about kicking with the toe of our boot in a negative way or a bullying way or a way that's going to harm a horse. We're doing it to assist what we were trying to communicate. And it should always
it's kind of like a nudge, right?
Very good. Yes. Nudging and kicking, a very soft kick can be a nudge. And, and then we can do it also with riding astride. Once you're on your horse, obviously we have two legs that will go over either side of that horse, and our legs are used to communicate. And I have a saying that I literally talk with my legs. I use my legs to talk to my horse. So the horse understands what the pressure is from my legs used in a nudging or a kicking motion to ask that horse possibly to go forward or to go sideways or even to back up. So we use that term. It's just a general term that we use as equestrians in riding our horse. You need to kick your horse to the left or use your left leg, move that horse over a little bit more with a little more firmer kicking. We just use that word K for applying pressure to our horse to get a desired result.
So like this goes back to, and I talked about us in the last episode and some other ones too. Nancy and I doing dressage with our horse and talking to the judges, and then talking to the horse, which at that point we were, one horse was abused. And so we were we were doing this as not to really be competitive. And everyone knew that we were just learning and getting our horse to even be in this kind of, I think we were in with the children, and kids that weren't anywhere near anything either yet. All of us were babies at this. The most amateur of amateurs were in there because I need to back up and say there were kids that were insanely, professional. So we were not in the same class. So let's just put amateur. And anyway, so talking and talking, with our horse Cinnabar, she knew from vocals and of course the nudging, but we weren't quite there yet. So in if you've trained your horse to a point, you may not have to ever communicate with voice, right? You can do it with leg and kicking, or no? Like that was my point. Like in a dressage thing, you're not supposed to talk to your horse, are you?
Well, I train with 4 major aids that aid us in communicating with horses. And the first one's going to be your voice. I truly use voice commands. Now, you're not going to hear me say across the arena, all right, dollar, now I want you to walk with a loud voice like that. I can talk under my breath. My horse's ear is maybe 28 inches from where I'm sitting in the saddle. She's going to hear my voice. And I can talk slowly under my breath to communicate a verbal command. But the verbal commands are also an association with the other aids. So the 4 aids are your voice, your seat, your legs, and your hands. And so it's all an association. And I prefer to have a horse, when I say the word ho, that horse hears that word, can process what it means, because that horses learn not just the word, but they learn other pressures from those other aids that communicate. This means we stop all motion and we don't move. And they learn that from my seat. So here's my voice command and my seat. And then lightly with my rein pressure through my hands on the mouth through a bit or a boselle, whatever we're using on our horse's head at the time. And so there's actually 3 of those 4 aids that ask that horse to stop. And then some people will use a leg squeeze for a stop, or putting their legs more forward, like the reiners do sometimes to stop horses. There's a spur stop that people could use in the show arena. So they may apply even the 4th aid of some leg pressure. So the verbal command is good to have, and I certainly use it, but people rarely will hear me because I talk so quietly under my breath. But it's an association that the horse has learned with the other aids.
Okay. So when you talk about the human connecting with the horse through so-called kicking, it's the pressure that you're doing through calf, heel, and then there's the heel with the spur.
Yes.
What is the role of spurs? Why do we need them? And okay. Why do we need spurs?
Let's take
I know they're historic, right? Yeah.
Let's just take it from the top. So we're sitting astride our horse. The first pressure that horse is going to feel, if I ask my horse to go forward or possibly to go sideways, I'm going to use my calf muscle, my calf pressure, because that's a softer pressure, and the horse might respond beautifully and be soft and light to that calf pressure, and I won't need to use any more of my leg to ask that horse to move. Now, if this calf pressure isn't enough, the horse doesn't truly understand fully what I'm asking, then I can apply my heel pressure in a soft and tapping motion, or solid pressure, whatever, it depends on whatever I'm asking for. And sometimes horses, can ignore even a heel pressure, and that's where the spur will come in. The spur is assisting your heel pressure in order to communicate what you would like your horse to do. And there's many different types of spurs. And of course, everybody thinks of the big old, possibly John Wayne, route spurs with the jingle bobs on and the jingle every time he took a step. And, you've got to be knowledgeable about spurs. You need to know how much, what type that your horse will respond to beautifully. You certainly don't want to put on the big 2-inch round spurs, jump on your horse, jab them into the sides, even with this light kick. And that horse may jump out from underneath you, but it might be way too much spur. I usually train with blunt spurs, so they're just blunt. There are no rowels on them, because it just assists again what my heel is trying to ask the horse to do. And the steel blunt spur on the end of my heel just makes my point a little bit more, so the horse will get it and respond. Of course, as soon as they respond, we release the pressure and praise them. So that's how they get it.
So this could also be used in an emergency situation, because that could be like on a trail, right? Something's happening and like, hey, I really mean this.
So let me tell you, Lisa. Yes, let me tell you this real quick, since you just made that point. I ride with spurs on my Chief Joseph trail ride. And I have spurs on pretty much all the time that I ride, and I may never use them. Because yes, in an emergency, I've already learned that my horse will respond to that spur if I need it. If I have an emergency to get out of a dangerous situation or a life-saving situation, I will probably use a little bit more spur on my horse's side to get a more instant result. Instead of waiting and pausing, sometimes in an emergency, you don't have that 4 seconds to just pause and wait for the horse to understand and respond. You might need them to jump into a life-saving maneuver right away.
So it's also kind of like when you think about a parent with their child, a younger child, say, and you go to cross the street and the kid is not, you change the tone of voice. And if the tone of voice isn't being heard, like then all of a sudden the kid's name goes from maybe John Philip Smith, I don't know. And then all of a sudden, instead of Johnny, it goes to John, and then also John Philip Smith. Like,
yes, right.
Kids
exactly. Right.
We have these different levels of communication. And it could also be because sometimes, sometimes horses go, man, I see some green grass over there. I'm going, and you're going, no, you aren't. And so like, that's part of it. So it's
I'll tell you what, that mother may not have the opportunity to take those 3 or 4 seconds to get to her son's full name of John William Smith. She's going to grab his shirt collar and she's going to pull him out of danger.
And that's exactly the point. Because sometimes you have to, in driving, like as I drive everywhere, all over this country, sometimes you have to do everything in a nanosecond.
Yes.
And you don't have time to even say what you don't. And I do what I call defensive driving. That's how we're still alive.
Right.
Honestly, I don't know what y'all listen, everybody go back to driving school after COVID. Okay.
I'm
just going to say, there's lines on the road. It does not mean you balance on top of the line. You go within the lines. We're not coloring in outside the lines. Now that's for a coloring book.
So Lisa, this is where our homework comes in. The homework, you learn a driving test, you learn to practice driving, so you're safe. The homework with horses comes in. You get into the classroom, which is the arena. You work with a trainer. You work on success of communication with your horse. So you are prepared for the what ifs once you leave that arena. And once I leave that arena, I'm out there on the Chief Joseph Trail Ride in Montana, and I want to make darn sure that my horse will respond in any situation. And I pretty much know them well enough, and they know me well enough that this is accomplished. So it's really a safety issue to know how to use your legs and to use those 4 aids so everybody is safe.
And that's when, like for a mom, when they hear mom means this is serious, this is real. And you're not crying wolf. You don't use spurs like as your normal way, right? So that's something I wanted to touch on because, I say cry wolf is that sometimes that's how people go to full throttle as the main mode of communication. And maybe you lose your dynamics or you lose the importance part of it. If, it's like a parent that's always yelling at their kid without starting off in the soft mode. I mean, eventually everybody just blocks out the yelling because it's not effective anymore. It's like, all right, they're yelling again. Who cares? I just don't care anymore. So, you know what I mean? So if someone is always using the spur instead of doing, if it's something like, hey, I just want to go to the left, you don't need to use your spur for that. If the horse already knows that's what you want to do, right?
That's why it takes time to train a horse. It's repetitive. That's how they learn. They need to learn with praise and positive reinforcement. If that leg goes onto the side, to move off to the right, and you put your left leg on your horse, and your horse does that, you instantly release that pressure and praise them. And that's what the homework is about. You've got to invest the time, and they always say the wet saddle blankets to train a horse. You don't do it with pressure. You don't do it with extreme pressure and roughness or bullying. That's the word that you use. You never force a horse into anything. Give them that opportunity to get it, and they will. I've got world champion horses because they've had time to absorb what I'm asking for and to be able to perform in the show arena. And we have such a partnership and such harmony. It takes time. It takes, and you have to invest time into this wonderful animal to communicate with them.
Yeah. So when you do a lot of that training, I remember working, number one, just in the ring, like constantly until and then it was like when everything worked, then we're like, yippee. And then when it worked again, yippee, yippee,
yeah.
The horse would suddenly go, oh, I did something. But there was work to be done in the saddle and off the saddle, even in lunging, because
Hmm.
I just, I mean, I'm going off my memory as a kid. I remember the lunging. I actually really enjoyed it because
Hmm.
this was like this communication zone. Even a horse could look in your eyes and you're looking in their eyes and they would know, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And
Hmm.
that little twitchy little thingy that you do on their little butt, it was like all about communication. This is what I want you to do. And we'll keep going. And I remember horses getting really pissy too. They can get pissy with, I'm
Well, you
done
know
with
what? That
doing
may have
this.
to be that may I think that might be the topic of our next letter, which would be L. We'll talk about lunging. There's so many positive things you can
Oh,
do with
I thought,
lunging.
oh my gosh, she's going to say P. We're going to talk about getting pissy with horses.
No, no, no,
I'm
no.
like, oh my gosh, you scared me there for a second. I thought, well, I
No,
didn't know
no,
we were
no,
going
no,
to get
no.
that way on this
No,
podcast. I'm just
no,
kidding, but
no.
yeah, it yeah, we'll do that as yeah, I like that. Lunging because I just remember doing that and feeling like that's where it could go either way. And it's like, but you as the human really couldn't be, you had to be focused. In other words, don't have your phone on and think you could sit there and take a phone call or look at your phone while you're lunging. You need to be 100% in. I
Yeah,
remember that. Yeah.
yeah, but focus is not just focus is very, very good, but you also have to have a plan. That's why we're doing the ABCs of horses. You need to have a plan, A, B, and C. What do I want to accomplish with my horse today? Does my horse follow me beautifully? Yes. Hey, that's great. If it doesn't, let's work on that. Let's work on that till we get it really nicely with enough time to give the horse a chance to get it. You just don't
Hmm.
have to rush through things. It's horrible when somebody tries to bring a horse in for training and they say, here, I want in 30 days, I want this horse to go out and perform in the show arena, and the horse isn't even broke yet. You can't put sometimes a time limit on what you're teaching. And that's the best part about having clients that bring you a horse and say, let's just find out what he's good at. Let's take the time and find out what his great little niche is going to be. And if it's Western pleasure and that's what you want to do, hopefully he'll do that. If it isn't, I'm going to be real honest that he probably won't fit in that category. And you might enjoy something else with your horse. But we can't put a square peg into a round hole with a horse. You need to do what they're the best at. And then they'll be happy and they'll be happy to perform with you. So, and getting back and talking about kicking, should we talk about why horses kick?
Yeah, I want to talk about that because I think it's I've been kicked. I've been kicked by horses, donkeys, mules, but I've also learned through all of that what not to do. And what I remember the one of the first things I think this was, we've talked before, when I was like complete beginner, it's like we weren't allowed even on the horse for a long time. But one of the things is how to communicate with the horse if you're going to go to its rear was to kind of rub your hand along the body to you get to the rump. Now, was that right? Wrong? I mean, it was just my way. So they didn't have like, suddenly I'm going to try and get your back leg and I'm moving really fast and they don't know you. You know what I mean? It was this
Well,
nice, slow way of saying, hello, I'm going down your body and then want to pick up your back hoof so I can, clean your hoof.
so if you have time and you have your own horse and you have the luxury of having it at your own facility, your home, or even if you have a boarding stable, I encourage people to go out and observe their horses. You just don't go out every day and put that halter on. Let's go, and we're going to go do this and we're going to do that. Why don't you watch your horse interact with possibly a stablemate that's next to them, how it reacts to possibly the stable help that's cleaning the paddocks, even when they get fed. Horses have such wonderful personalities. They are very expressive about their environment, about their life, about how they interact with other animals. And that's something that you need to observe and learn and cherish and literally have
Mm-hmm.
an understanding of their environment, how they take in their environment and their world, because that will keep you a little bit safer in understanding what might spook your horse. If the stable help goes by, he's driving by with a little tractor and the tractor rattles a lot. That horse jumps every time he goes by. There's just things you need to know about your horse. Or either he's inquisitive, walks up to the fence when the rattly tractor goes by, and it doesn't frighten him. Those are things you just want to put in your pocket and in your mind to always know that about your horse. You've seen your horse experience this particular thing, and how does your horse react.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then after that, you also need to understand the horse's perspective of everything. So the horse is a prey animal, which means in their mind, they're going to get eaten by somebody if they don't run away from danger. I mean,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
what they're always looking for. Is they're always going to scan the horizon and make sure it's safe. They're going to look down the trail ahead of time. Those ears are
Mm,
flickering constantly to take in sounds. The position of their head's going to be different too. They're always going to be observing their environment, any change in their environment, and they're going to be on alert. So you need to understand how a horse processes things, how they think, how they're going to react.
mm,
So with all of that taken into consideration, you'll be a little bit safer around a horse, maybe one you don't know or a new one that you don't know very well. And these are things that you just have to create a pattern as you take care of your horse. Like you were saying, you run your hand around its body and come to the backside. If you're going to clean all four legs, you have to have a routine that the horse is comfortable with. And routine is so important to make horses comfortable
mm.
so they don't have a reason to kick.
Yeah.
So, just the basic things of kicking is a horse is going to kick possibly when they're startled. Somebody moves too quickly. Somebody
Yep.
drops a very loud, noisy thing, might make them jump. Some horses will move sideways and spook and shudder and want to get out of the way. Doesn't mean every horse that spooks going to kick. Not every horse is going to kick when he hears a muffler fall off a motorcycle going down the road, but you have to understand how they're going to react. And kicking is a defense mechanism to anything that becomes a predator, which could be a human, could be a dog. A predator is definitely going to be, a sound rustling in the bushes that they can't identify because they are not going to comprehend like you and I are. They're not going to take time to turn around and wonder if that's a quail or if that's a mountain lion. They hear a
Hmm.
rustling sound. They're uncomfortable with that. They're going to leave the area. They're going to be
Yeah.
safe. They're going to
It's
leave.
protective. Yeah. It's
Right.
reactionary
It's
too. It's
reactionary.
reactionary. And
Right.
that's something with all animals. And I think, when I say I've been kicked, it's just because sometimes, especially when they put a bunch of kids in with horses, like here's 20 kids all doing class together. I'm not really a fan of that. I'm just
Oh.
going to say that's how we kind of got hurt. But
Mhm.
sometimes it works. Sometimes, every place is different. But, you're with another kid and, you know, they do something and that's how you ended up kicked. That's how a lot of times. But
So yes.
honestly, it is about these horses, if these horses were trained to have kids be, kids around them, rambunctious. I'm watching my P's and Q's. We were brats. And, we've got a lot of energy. And if, there's the horses, if they're not used to that, they could kick you. If,
Well,
you know,
okay, all right, but that needs to be
oh,
addressed as well.
okay.
If there's a boarding stable, if there's a trainer involved, that's the first thing you have to express to the people that are coming to learn to ride or be around a horse, is the horses are going to reflect your energy. So that's the
Mm,
first thing I tell my students, because if they're bouncing around, kicking up dirt, they can't stand still. They can't even listen to a couple of words that I'm saying. They're not going to be good candidates to be around that horse that day. They need to learn discipline. They need to learn safety, and they need to tone it down. So
yeah,
because that quick movement and all that movement that they're doing and bouncing around and kicking up dirt is going to be considered a predator in the horse's mind. So if we stay calm, our horses will stay calm.
yeah, it's really interesting when you get into the world of training and kids, right? It's a whole other world. It's almost like, I think there's something that should be said, which this goes to the eye. I know we did instruction, but when it's like I was serious about it, but then a lot of parents were just dumping their kids off. Oh, they want horses, so we're dumping them off. I was serious about it. And then you've got like a brat next to you who's now going to poke your horse. Like that's wrong, and so you get kicked over those kinds of circumstances. And I think it's important to just talk about that because situations happen with animals. Nancy and I observe animals. That's our thing. We watch them in the wild. We know don't start your motor at this time if you're watching from your car and on wildlife and safaris and all of that. We've been charged by animals, and just because you happen to be on their pathway. I mean, the last time in the sequoias, we walked in and on a mama bear with three cubs, and we had the good sense to stand back, let her know we're not interested in anything. She moved on, we moved on. And it was because we didn't act out. whereas somebody could have acted out or maybe tried to take their cell phone and get closer. Well, then you're going to get hurt. And I think that's the same with horses. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but
No, but there needs to be some guidelines. Lisa, there has to be
yes.
guidelines. So if that little boy next to you is poking your horse, there need to be stable rules. There needs to be, and that needs to be laid out when you stand on or come onto the property right away, that boarding facility or whatever you might have, even your private facility. If you're a responsible adult, any responsible person, and using common sense, there needs to be stable rules. This is what you do and this is what you don't do for everybody to be safe. Now let's flip that coin for a minute. And let's say you got kicked because a little boy is poking your horse or something. Whoever's been kicked already, you need to seriously think about and try to analyze, why did that happen? So you've got to, and let's say, Lisa, you know that the little boy was poking your horse on the other side. You decided to kick and you happened to be in the way. So we know that was a human stimulus right there. So you just need to be aware of this. You have to, again, break it down to looking at the horse's perspective. And the little things that can be bothering a horse could be, yes, a little boy's not supposed to be poking a horse. You could have a little yappy dog running around. You could have bees or flies, bumblebees.
Yes, that's the donkey.
There's so many. There's so many stimulus, but you need to understand that. So if you have flies flying around, you put fly spray on. If you have a yappy dog, you put the yappy dog back in the car. Or dogs aren't allowed; they have to be unleashed, not near the horses where the people and children are working. Again, common sense, and horses will kick to defend themselves. So people have to remember that horses could kick because, let's say, a strap accidentally fell down on the saddle that hadn't been there before. Yes. Let's say something came loose on the saddle and you put the saddle up on the other side. All of a sudden it hits the horse in the flank and it frightens him. He could kick out at that. There's a lot of reasons. Horses will kick out if they think there's something wrapped around their leg, a piece of wire, a piece of string, even if they're not comfortable with the lunge whip or the lunge line. There's just so many reasons. And that's why you need to spend time learning what your horse is comfortable with and establishing a routine and a pattern, so people don't get kicked. And of course, the worst case scenario is a human that isn't very nice, and that would be the little boy that's poking that horse. Shame on him for doing that. But someone should have intervened right there. And if nobody's intervening, then you need to just walk away from that horse real quickly, go find an adult, somebody that's responsible, the stable manager, and let her know this is happening. There's got to be stable rules. We have rules in our life to keep us safe.
That's the point. Well, that's kind of what I was kind of pointing at is like, actually, I think parents should know a little bit more about where you're dropping your kids off, and maybe be there for the first few lessons and see how things go.
Well, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag here, but I'm working on a 4th book, and it's probably going to address some of this.
So good. All I'm going to say I can tell you many stories. All I can tell you is I could go on and on and on about how dumping your kids off at a training stable while you go to work or go shopping is not a form of babysitting. Okay.
No.
And so and neither is school, by the way. Anyhow, so I'm just going to put it there. That's my little rant of the day, but I mean it on a way, because this is, a horse. And a horse, no matter what, I mean, they've got their wild instincts. And if you have a brat that really hurts the horse, kids can do things out of trial and error. They just curious, what happens if I poke an animal here or there? I've seen what dogs have gone through with kids, and they're not meaning anything, but it's, there's that inquisitive time of our lives where we do things like, oh yeah, if we put our hand on the stove, it burns. Even if your mom told you.
Lisa, don't you think that happens with common sense when you're in a family situation and your parents are raising you, and you learn these things because your parents are involved with your life, and they're telling you, don't put your hand on the stove. Don't pet that dog, a strange dog that you don't know. I mean, I learned a lot of common sense when I was growing up, and I would hope that every generation would still maintain some common sense.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, I know. Anyway,
I do want to go back to the horses, because sometimes the kicking thing. So, people new to horses, I know people have some big fears of horses. I was just talking to a friend the other day, and they're like, I'm really scared of them. They're beautiful, but I'm scared. And it's like, because they stomp or their eyes look like they're mean. And I'm like, what do you mean, man? They're so beautiful. Their eyes are maybe they're rolling your eyes at you because you're fearful. animals, you always talk about how they pick up your energy.
Mm-hmm.
But horses stomp a lot, and that's because of flies and things. So don't be scared of that. Like, understand that. That's
Well,
something that
that's
I've
what I
seen
said
people be
earlier.
scared of.
I
Yeah.
said earlier in this podcast, you've got to learn why your horse stomps. Are you out there? Are you
Mm.
sitting at the edge watching why they're stomping? Is it because there really are seriously flies? That particular, summer's really bad for flies. Are they getting protected from all the flies that are biting them? You've got to know why they're stomping. If it's in the winter and there's no flies, there are no flies, then, does my horse have a bellyache? Is there something else that's
Yeah.
causing my horse to stomp? That's what I'm saying about observing their mannerisms.
Now, let's talk about farriers. Can we just touch on that for, I know we've done hoof care, but I remember, and you touched on this earlier too, having to have that communication where you could tap on the horse's hoof to let them know I'm picking it up to clean it. And I've seen farriers do that. So, I know that, you could get kicked if you're trying to clean your horse's hoof and you do something silly, but not, it's like, I don't know, but I do believe when we're down, bending over, and we're in that position, you could get hurt. You could get kneed even, right? So that tap tap on the hoof, I think we need to do that, right? To have that time in to have that communication so that it's not just you, but if you have a farrier or you're doing your own work, that, no one gets hurt.
That's just a very basic
I
grooming
know.
maneuver that we do when we're getting our horses ready to ride, or we haven't been able to go out and ride them. We want to check their feet. Oh my gosh, you should be cleaning your horse's hooves every other day if you're not out there riding them anyway, because they could pick up so much winter and summertime. That is a basic, I'll call it maneuver that you need to spend time training your horse to accept. So it's kind of surprising me if people say, well, I've got to go out and clean my horse's hoof now. My horse kicked me. All right, then you haven't done your homework. You haven't practiced your routine. You haven't made your horse comfortable with what you're asking, and you haven't taken the time to give that horse a chance to absorb what you're asking. So I don't literally tap on my horse's leg or hoof if I want to clean their hoof. There's a process of about 4 seconds that it takes for a horse to feel a touch from you, to process that then in their brain, and then to respond to give you that desired result. So in about 4 seconds, I put my hand at the top of my horse's leg at the elbow and run my hand down the back side of that leg all the way, not quickly, but just comfortably, because I'm going to be bending over. I want to be comfortable bending over. By the time I get down to the fetlock, which is the ankle bone on a horse, I give a small little pressure. I hate to even say a pinch. And my horse knows that I've already asked. They already know what I'm going to be
Mm.
asking. By the time I put my hand at the top of the leg, even before I get to the bottom, my horses are already shifting their weight and literally lifting their hoof up for me. So I've done
Mm.
my homework. I'm comfortable. My horse is comfortable. I shouldn't be kicked, and I haven't been kicked because my horses understand what that means. Now, if it takes you a couple of weeks to get through just even one leg getting that done correctly, then good for you. That's one leg.
Mm.
And then your horse will trust you and be comfortable with doing it with a back leg. Well, there shouldn't be any reason that you get kicked. What is the reason of why you're getting kicked
Mm.
when you're cleaning
And
their hoof?
then you shouldn't kick your horse. Can we just say that? I remember I told you about that story about that horse trainer that got off the horse and kicked the horse in the
Yeah,
chest.
yeah.
And
It's
so
totally
I know this
unnecessary.
kind of led to this conversation, I think, too. And I mean, it was like, take her down, man. Like, it was almost like a bar brawl with people running at her because it was wrong. You
Yeah,
don't kick
right.
the horse
That's right.
like that.
That's right.
And if a horse wants to take you out, they could. I'm just
Mhm.
saying, really. But
There's so many ways and calm ways of asking your horse to do things, and that's where the pressure comes in. You apply pressure. They don't understand that first bit of pressure. You can apply just a little bit more, and actually with a hoof, if that horse doesn't want to lift that hoof for some reason and leg lock and not give that to you, you can push in with your shoulder, literally push the horse slightly off
mhm,
balance to where they
yep.
have to lift the hoof. You get that hoof up. You say, oh, what a good boy. You start praising them and set the leg back down again. I make a big deal out of goodness. And my horse gives me something, and I use the term yes and no. If my horse is saying, yes, here's the hoof, I'm giving it to you now, I make a big deal out of it. I'll put that hoof down slowly, I'll go back to their face and rub their eyes, pet their neck. They hear the tone of my voice. Oh my gosh, what a good boy. You just did great. And my horses love this. That's why I've got such great horses. They're very responsive to me. They love working with me. I love working with them. But I'm the more intelligent being, thank goodness. And I give them enough time to learn that pressure, what that means. And when they give the correct response, they love getting the response from me. Oh, good boy. Lots of pats.
Yeah. Lots of attagirls and attaboys.
Yes.
Come on, we all like that.
Yes.
As humans, it's like acknowledgement.
That's right.
Goes a long way in humans and animals. And how are they supposed to know if they're responding to your commands if you don't say something, if you don't do anything? It's like,
Lisa, kindness works for humans. Kindness works with animals.
That's K. K
That's
for
right.
kicking and kindness.
That's right.
How kicking and kindness go hand in hand. That's
right.
Today's show label. How kicking and kindness go hand in hand. They truly do, because it's not really kicking. Right. It's nudging, but that's the word used. And Christy, I love these podcasts with you. I always learn much, Lisa. And I just didn't know, like, as from my little time of horse riding, as a kid, I had no idea all of this stuff was in my heart and soul from all these different little experiences, right?
Yes.
And so now I'm like, well, why didn't I know Christy when I was younger, But it's just so, and I think what's interesting too is I want people to think about when they get on horses, when they're on vacation, and understand also, just take in, if you're listening to this because you're just a horse lover, you've always wanted a horse, listen to what Christy says, because you may go to Mexico and you're like, oh, I'm going to go a horse ride on the beach. Do you know how those horses are trained? Do you? You're going to hope that, guide is going to take you the right way. Well, hopefully, and probably, but take these notes of, communication with horses seriously, because no matter what, if it's a brand new horse, slow down, take a deep breath, have whatever communication you can. Just, if you're going to go to the rump, let them know you're going behind. It's the same thing as in a restaurant. And in fact, I work with a lot of restaurant people, and I'm often in the back of a restaurant, and I know how to move fast because I'm photographing food, and you get out of the way. I'm like one of those, like, they make a dish, throw it down. I don't even have a full second to take a photograph at times when some of the work I've done over the years. And I've learned, do not mess with people in the kitchen. It's hot. They're moving things out, but there's the word behind you. And you have to hear it that it was for you, and understand, you talk about energy. Well, running a kitchen is kind of similar to the horse thing, because if you're going to go behind a horse, and they don't actually kick directly behind, they do kind of a slant. You let the horse know, but they can see you. But if you're moving fast, they're going to consider you like a predator, like you were saying. It's the same thing in a kitchen. Someone goes, hey, they're carrying out a plate of food, maybe a tray of food, maybe they have a hot pan of oil. Behind you means something's going on behind you. Do not do anything. And it's the same thing with horses. Thinking about this. Kind of interesting, huh? Because you don't want to get cooked, and you don't want that hot oil on your back. So just saying. Everything, just think behind. Just behind. So everyone, WDNHorse.com is the place to go to keep up with Christy. Always fun. So we know what we're doing next month then, Christy.
Yes, I think we'll talk about lunging. Yes.
I love it. I love a good lunge. Right. Right now, I think in Georgia, we could go luging as it snows outside the window here. I'm going, let's go luging. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on Big Blend Radio's ABCs of Horses with Christy Wood. Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's ABCs of Horses featuring Christy Wood. You can keep up with Christy and learn more about her services and her books by going to her website, WDNHorse.com. Keep up with Big Blend Radio at BigBlendRadio.com.